Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Women for the Environment Breakfast, proudly presented by Bush Heritage Australia. My name is Annabelle Homer, and I am delighted to be your MC this morning at this beautiful venue here at the Pullman in Adelaide. But let's kick things off. Let's get straight down to business. I'd like to introduce proud Kaurna elder, mother, grandmother, cross-cultural consultant and artist Katrina Galabina Power to perform our Welcome to Country.
Kamame, tamamo, nankara, nachele, napadla, kawano, yakana, yura! Kamame, tamamo, nankara, nachele, napadla, kawano, yakana, yunga. Namani Badni, Tandanyaga, Binbimbalya, Bukiana, Ghana, Nainari Kartunya, Katrina, Galabina, the lover of fire. Merende Nakonde, Nanyuaide Nyaptu, Karalta, Minala. Grandmothers, grandfathers, mothers, fathers, aunties, uncles, sisters, and brothers. Today we come to sit and stand as the Kaurna do on sacred Kaurna land, stolen Kaurna land, land that has never been surrendered. We pay our respects to all the Kaurna that were, all the Kaurna that are, and all the Kaurna that will be. We pay our respects to all our elders and our young people, black, white, red, yellow, and rainbow. It's been, I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed. Yesterday, I hadn't done a welcome for a year until yesterday. But this endangered species know that I'm in a really incredible, safe habitat amongst women. And I'm living proof that a welcome to country is not an endangered species, despite white outrage and neo-Nazism. I want to talk about the Father and the Son and the Holy Devil. I'm talking about Trump. I'm talking about Bill Gates and his decision and timing around alarmism and Epstein. I want to talk about the grandmothers, the mothers, and the holy daughters, and the importance of understanding the difference in seeing land as something to be raped and profited from, as opposed to seeing the land as First Nations people do, as our mother. For 32 years I've been doing Welcomes to Country, and I'm exhausted, absolutely exhausted. And it speaks volumes to me that I chose to come out with Bush Heritage, who I've got awesome love for, although I'm a city kid, so any opportunity I have to learn, I'll take it. And I don't want to be speaking, and you can only take so many king hits as a lone koala surrounded by white pointers. So today, yesterday I learnt some stuff around what's going on in Adamson country, and I want to pay tribute to my grandfather and Itika Sanderson Bromley's great-grandfather, who were good mates, good men we had then. And recently my granddaughter, who's 15, she went to Adamson country for the first time, and I asked her, is it okay if Nanny reads? This was her take on her experience, first contact experience in Adamson country. Now, she knows Nanny's been to London, New York, Washington and Los Angeles working for Rupert Murdoch, but I've never been to Adamson country. So I was grateful for the opportunity, and I want to encourage you to take note of me getting pronunciations wrong and show some courage and some willingness to learn to speak each other's language and sit with the discomfort of language being foreign, as we have had to. So this is from my granddaughter, Tiahni Power. I turned 60,000 years old in April. So I have a new sense of the pen is mightier than the spear. I left the Tizer in 1992. It's time for me to work some white magic with that pen. So that is my intention. So this was her camp reflection. I really enjoyed being on Adamson country. Now, one of the things is I really encouraged my granddaughter and her mum to put Tiahni in a Catholic school. Now, like I said, my commitment is to the grandmothers, the mothers and the daughters, okay? I'm not interested in a world that only focuses on the fathers, the sons and the Holy Spirit. That's not okay with me. So she went to a Catholic school, the first in our family. I really enjoyed being on Adamson country. I would go back in a heartbeat if I could. But with saying that, I'm glad to be back home on my own land in Kaurna country. As a Kaurna woman, I love that she sees herself as a woman at 15, because I'm saying the minute you come out, we teach our babies, you're your own woman. Yeah? The land is our mother. As a Kaurna woman myself, I am always in deep thought about country and how she gets treated. But being in Adamson country, I realised that my country was also once beautiful and free before it was made into a city. I feel very sorry that my country is hurting when I think about how she, our mother, feels. I imagine she feels trapped. I really hope the Adamson country stays the way it is, with little to no buildings and roads. While being on Adamson country, I felt a range of different emotions, but one feeling I strongly felt was connection. I felt connected to country. I felt connected with my ancestors, along with my loved ones that have passed. I especially felt connected with myself and those around me. I learnt so many things on camp, but one story that really stuck with me that Itika, our tour guide, told us is the one about Yurlu, kingfisher bird, and the tuakuras, rainbow serpents. The story was about how the tuakuras ate all the people and got really full, so they laid in a circle, head to tail, and created the meeting place. A kara will pee in a pound. I'm not someone who believes in God, so when I heard the story, I thought, that makes so much sense compared to what I was taught growing up in a Catholic school. I think the story resonates with me so much because you can see that the story aligns with the shapes of a kara. I also understood what Itika was saying. I didn't question it or feel it confused like I did when I heard the Catholic version. We First Nations people never needed Christianity to save us. We had our own way of life. Christianity was forced upon us, and because of it, we have lost some of our ways of being connected to culture. It was a tactic to brainwash First Nations people so that we listened instead of being connected. And in some areas, it is still around, trying to further diminish our culture and history. Plus, I always loved snakes, so that further connected me to the story. That's something me and her don't have in common, even though I was born in the year of the snake. Before we got to the campsite, we stopped somewhere so that we could be welcomed to country by a tika. Being welcomed to country is very important, no matter whose country you're on. When you are welcome, it lets the good and bad spirits know that it is okay that you're on their land and that they don't need to hurt or attach to you. One of the teachers, a non-Aboriginal teacher, commented on how healthy the area is. Itika quickly told us that the healthy plants we were seeing are invasive and damaging to country. She said that the plants were brought there when colonisation happened. Some of the original plants were so badly damaged that they won't be able to grow in that spot again. Someone asked if we could ever go back to old ways, but Itika said we in country won't be able to go back to old ways because of how damaged the country is. When Itika said that, I felt a great hurt for our motherland. Colonisers split up what was once whole into half. White people didn't care that Adamson mob knew their country like the back of their hand. Because of colonisers, I'm encouraging you to change the language there and reframe it to invaders. That's a generational change. I'm sorry, folks. Because of colonisers' selfishness and greed, they ruined Adamson mob's country and their knowledge and culture. Not only did they break Adamson mob, but they broke everywhere else in Australia. Like I said, I always think about country, and with that, I often have questions like, how come people don't care about the land we live on? Our mother does so much for us, yet we continue to hurt her. It all ties back to colonisation. White people didn't care then, and most don't now. And because of the history and original people being brainwashed. For me, it's confusing because there are so many signs that our mother is giving us to tell us she's in pain. She is communicating. I saw in Adamson country through the lack of water in the rivers, and when we went to the rock art site, country struggled through the moss trying to grow over the graffiti. You can also see it through the floods, tsunamis, hurricanes and wildfires. These are all communication tactics, so why do we ignore her? When listening to Itika and Uncle Christian talk, I was in awe of how well they know their country. They know the plants, the animals and their mob stories. I was reflecting on how I felt on the camp and realised I felt some jealousy towards their knowledge, but that only inspires me to learn more about my country and the stories. I feel a great respect for their understanding about country. I think the reason I don't have knowledge about my country goes back to colonisation and the wiping of Ghana history through missions and sickness. While being back at home, I have reflected on how much I have learnt on camp. I have thought of the good and the bad. I feel like this trip has helped me to accept that not everything can be perfect. I'm not exactly sure what has changed to make me stress less about perfection, but I know that something has, and I'm okay with just knowing that. That's Tiahni power. That's my granddaughter. I'm hoping that she will be an ambassador with you mob too. So one day that she'll be standing here instead of Nanny. And I'm going to close with this. I know I've taken a lot of time, but indulge me, we didn't invent the clocks. And I want to just share this. So, Susan Close and I have a long history, and one of the things I love is that I know a lot of white women. I mean, I get paid more because I've got grey hairs. White women lose money when they get grey hairs. And one of the things I've loved about Susan Close is that often I know that I'm challenging the white chiefs and saying what a lot of white women are thinking. And so I don't really give a shit if you love or loathe me. as long as you remember me as a truth teller. So, when I heard Susan Close was leaving as Deputy Premier, and Susan Close knows I don't stroke egos, and I never acknowledge anyone in particular at these events. I'm not interested in painting up and dancing for entertainment purposes, okay? I'm here to be a truth teller, whatever the cost. So anyway, when I heard this news, straight away, I sent Susan a text. I said, Ninamani, Susan, hi. I am writing my memoir now, and I intend to cite stories involving white chiefs. I just want you to know I'm sad you have decided to quit politics, but I am happy for you. I know the Murdoch and the politicians' game, but always felt you were authentic in your respect for me. I just want you to know I shall miss you and always honour you for that. So, Susan, I hadn't hardly finished sending it, and I got a response straight back. I was so impressed, Susan. We get typing skills. And she reckons, Marnie, good, you keep being amazing, my friend. Well, there's been a development. So that is just, it was embryonic. You're the first person that I had told that, you know what, I ain't flapping my gums anymore because I ain't got time to waste. So the development is it's embryonic, but it's going to be called All Power to Me. Yeah. So I'm gonna be working on that. So in closing, I say, Marende na konde na nyawade nyatu karoto minala. Let us sit and talk together. Let us eat and drink together. Let us sing and dance together. Let us laugh and cry together, so that our children and their children's children can feel the wind and the breeze, find sunshine in the rain and shelter from the storm. But most especially, that the whole world's children and their children's children can feel the warmth of a campfire which our solid, deadly, fantastic, magic women have created for them. Welcome to Kaurna country. And you know what? What a feeling it is to feel safe. I feel safe. And I feel proud of myself for being prepared to take a stage again. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. Wow, it was a heartfelt and an honest welcome to country, and we feel very honoured that you felt safe and also the ability to come back to Bush Heritage to this breakfast and do a welcome to country. We feel very, very honoured. Thank you very much. On behalf of the event host Bush Heritage Australia, I would also like to acknowledge the Kaurna traditional owners upon whose land this event is taking place. I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present and welcome our nation's first people here with us today. We acknowledge that Aboriginal people have looked after country for thousands of years and continue to do so. We also acknowledge their right to self-determination. Working together to look after country has significant lasting benefits across the Australian landscape. This morning, we are gathering to recognise the importance of strong leadership in protecting and enhancing our beautiful natural world, and to shine a spotlight on the value of women's and diverse voices and strong collaboration in this space. And it's great to see so many people from different sectors here this morning, including corporate, government, environmental, and academia. And a very warm welcome to our special guest, the Honourable Susan Close, who will be up here very shortly to speak to us. Facilitating cross-sector collaboration. Now, that is a big part of this morning's event, because if we are truly all in this together, then we all have to play a part in halting the destruction of nature. And ultimately, we can achieve so much more with unified action. Compared with climate change, biodiversity loss has been a bit of an underdog in terms of focus and action. However, since COP27 and the 2024 UN Biodiversity Conference, there's been a greater emphasis placed on the deep connection between these two issues. with the United Nations declaring that there is a no net zero without nature protection. These are complex, critical issues that we're facing and which don't have a single solution, but many. We are aiming for the same goal, the same destination, just with different routes to get there. And so our theme this morning, climate change and biodiversity loss, are two sides of the same coin, pretends that you can't resolve one without addressing the other. They are intricately linked and therefore require concurrent responses. The response is the shared challenge of our lifetime. And right now we're in a very transformative stage as we enter the second half of the 2030s, which many believe is the most crucial period to make change. That we have years, not decades, to address these crises. A little overwhelming, yes, but also incredibly exciting. Whether you're in government or local council, at an NGO or a not-for-profit, in academia, caring for country or working in ESG and sustainability, we're all in this for a better world. So together is the way to make it a reality. We are going to discuss this idea and more during our panel this morning, and we're going to be hearing from three wonderful speakers who I believe demonstrate just how critical women's leadership is if we are to find meaningful and transformative ways to better address environmental challenges. Before we break for a bite to eat, because I'm sure you're getting a little bit peckish, we have a couple of short presentations. I'd first like to introduce Vibeke Stuyson, who's the Executive Manager of Engagement at Bush Heritage, who is stepping in for CEO Rachel Lowry to present the host address. Put your hands together.
Over millions of years, our ecosystems have evolved to support billions of diverse species. They bring an irreplaceable beauty to our world, sustain us and enliven our curiosity. Here in Australia, our unique ecosystems allow animals and plants found nowhere else in the world to thrive, one of which sparked the beginning of Bush Heritage Australia. In 1991, our founders raised the funds to purchase 2 forest blocks and prevent them from being sold and logged. A dedicated community was born, and our mission to heal and protect the bush. Over the years, Bush Heritage has grown into a leading conservation not-for-profit. Now our impact spans the continent and its waters through our vast reserve network and partnerships. We apply science and the knowledge of Australia's First Nations people to guide our actions and build resilience into our landscapes and restore habitat for precious wildlife. We see possibility far and wide and walk in harmony with First Nations people and our agricultural partners to make sure our on-ground impact is deep, collaborative and long-lived. Working from one horizon to the next, for the smallest ant and the tallest tree, for you and those who follow in your footsteps. By 2030, we are working towards an ambitious plan to deepen and double our impact. This work is made possible by our supporters. With your help, we can achieve these ambitious targets. Our life and our future depend on these complex ecosystems, and they depend on us.
Good morning, everybody. On behalf of Bush Heritage Australia, I'm really thrilled to welcome you all. I was here when we had our last breakfast like this a couple of years ago. It was a sold-out event. We had 140 guests, and so this time we thought we'll go bigger, and we sold out again. So there's 200 people in this room, and just judging from people coming in, there's the same energy that filled our bucket last time. People excited to be here and to connect and learn together. So thank you for getting up early, getting dressed for those of you that are used to working from home, and just being here with us. Really, really thrilled to be here. As you saw in the video, we have been protecting and restoring Australia's most precious landscapes for almost 35 years, and with the boots on the ground, the hands in the soil, we're really proud of what we've achieved for those first 3 decades. We've expanded biodiversity hotspots, we're restoring vast ecosystems, we're building enduring and strong partnerships, not just with traditional custodians, as Katrina spoke about so beautifully earlier, and her grandchild, but also with researchers, other landholders, volunteers, donors, so many more people. We're working together currently across more than 20 million hectares. But as you touched on earlier, the climate change, or the challenges that we face, the biodiversity loss, the climate change, and all those accelerating pressures on nature, they are immense. And so a few years ago, when we celebrated our 30th birthday, we took a look at what we had achieved, and we realised that actually the incremental progress we'd made actually wasn't enough. We really needed to think bigger, act bolder, and move faster, and so and work more collaboratively to protect healthy country forever. And that's why we launched that 2030 strategy that was talked about in this video. In short, it aims to deepen and double by the end of this decade. So in 8 years, we're trying to do what we did in our first 30 years of our existence, which is pretty bold. And yeah, we talked about it yesterday. These wrinkles and the wrinkles of some of our staff is because of that, because we have a big ambition. We want to do a lot, but also the smiley wrinkles are because we are doing a lot and we've achieved a lot of things, and we are quite certain that we will get there. But to get there, we really need to scale up our conservation footprint. We need to strengthen our partnerships, and we need to lead with science and respect for country in every single decision that we make. We also see an important role in connecting change makers, all of you in this room today, so that together we can have an impact. And really that's what today is about. We know that nature itself holds many of the solutions to the climate crisis that we're facing. Healthy ecosystems that are bushlands, grasslands, wetlands, the oceans. They are the natural carbon sinks. They store emissions, they cool our planet, they support life. And so when we invest in nature, we're investing in a safer, more resilient future for everybody. So as you enjoy your breakfast this morning, and the rich conversations that are ahead, I really encourage you to think about what collaboration at scale means. So across government, business, science, community, how can we turn the tide on biodiversity loss and climate change together? And I hope that in a couple of hours when you leave this room, you leave feeling hopeful and inspired, because we have an incredible panel of incredible women talking today, but also on your table and next to you, on the table next to you, we have incredible people. We have people that are politicians, they're policymakers, they're influencers, we have innovators, we have business leaders, we have scientists, we have ecologists, we have biologists. All of you are people that actually hold power to change. You vote, you have superannuation funds. And so I hope that you will have interesting conversations, and that it will fill your buckets, and that you will leave, as I said, full of hope, because there's a lot to be hopeful for and a lot to be inspired by. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. Enjoy your breakfast. Thanks.
Thank you, Vibeke. Now, before we have our breakfast, I'd now like to call our special guest, Honourable Susan Close, State Member for Port Adelaide and the former Minister for the Environment, Climate Change and Water, to say a few words. Thank you.
Nina mani napudni. Katrina, I'm so glad you've come back to doing welcomes. You've given me various interesting shout-outs over the years, but I reckon that one was my favourite, so thank you. That was a very generous offering from you. And your granddaughter, oh my God, that was an incredible letter. 15. That was a remarkably articulate, thoughtful and deeply spiritual, connected letter. I was really impressed, and as with you, very hopeful for the future when we hear that from our young people. I, as Environment Minister, and throughout my life, but as Environment Minister, I had, lots of responsibilities, heritage and recycling waste, circular economy and so on. All of them very, very important and absolutely essential to the transition we need to make. But the thing that's always filled my heart has been nature, right from really young, going out camping with my parents. My dad was a big bird watcher, and we'd go out bush and look at birds and have a campfire at night. Watching David Attenborough's show, that I'm old enough that I saw that Life on Earth series, that seminal series that changed a whole lot of people's ideas about how beautiful and wonderful our world is. And the greatest joy that I've had when I was Environment Minister was in being able to be part of this big conversation about nature, because I appreciate the UN's description of the two sides of the coin for climate and environment and nature, but actually I'm kind of over anything that does anything that is equivalent to nature, because actually nature's the foundation, and economy, society, dealing with climate change, everything rests on this earth. And getting across to people not only that is true, but there are things we can do about it, is beyond urgent. It is essential, and it is desperately, desperately urgent. We cannot deal with climate change, quite rightly as was articulated. We cannot deal with climate change without nature, but we can't do anything else without nature. And the revolution in how we think about nature, what we do about nature, and how we pay for it, that's the revolution of ideas and approach that we are involved in right now. And all of you are significantly part of that. We need to make sure that people understand, that they think in a way that recognises that truth. We need to make sure that we are offering specific and real projects that tangibly can happen and change. And we also need to revolutionise the way in which we do our funding, the way that the economy works, in order to recognise that. And all three of those things are what you are all involved in all the time. Let me give you a tangible example of one that I have been banging the drum on. So how do we think about things? This algal bloom has been horrific. Do not waste a crisis. Make sure that people understand that it isn't just a really sad, awful thing that's happening and will go away again, but is a warning sign not only of the impact of climate change, but our utter dependence on healthy ecosystems, and the fact that nature is the only buffer we have in the climate change we're experiencing right now, and will continue to for some time, even in the best of all possible worlds. And we tell people then, yes, understand that this is climate change. Yes, understand that not having a healthy ecosystem suddenly is devastating to people's hearts as well as to our economies. But also explain that we would not have this experience had we, 200 years ago, not destroyed the 1,500 linear kilometres of shellfish reefs that were all along our coastline. An error of judgment, an error of understanding that we're paying for now, a long time later. So 1,500 linear kilometres stiff with oysters and other shellfish and other life that congregates on these reefs. But one oyster cleans a bathtub full of water a day, every day. Imagine what the experience of the algal bloom would have been had all of those oysters and other bivalves been able to eat it. So we need to explain that to people. And then not just leave them with that feeling of regret and guilt, but say, here's the good news. So here's the project. We have the idea, here's the project. We can rebuild them. We can rebuild these reefs. We can bring them back so that next time we have a protective buffer, so that we're repairing by working with nature. And then the last bit is the funding bit. We have to stop thinking about nature as an extra, a luxury, a thing that farmers might do in their spare time, get some volunteers up and do some planting. This is infrastructure. This is more important than our roads and our bridges and our schools and our hospitals, because none of those will exist if we don't have our natural infrastructure working well, because climate change is coming to get us. So when we think about funding after a disaster, and we very easily fund roads and we very easily rebuild schools, as we should, we also ought to be rebuilding nature, strengthening her resilience so that we're ready for the next time. And taking people through the idea of how important nature is, the specific examples of what we can do to give hope and agency, which are in desperately short supply. And then also making sure that we're building our funding models, our way of thinking about the economy. That's how we're going to get through this. And government belongs in all of those. By no means do I shirk the responsibility of government. And in no more than in that last one, where to make nature repair markets work, we need government to be very present, not only in the guidelines, the legislation, the prioritisation, which we've done some good work on in the Biodiversity Act, but also in how that gets funded and rewarded and recognised. We need philanthropists. We need corporates looking for ESG credentials, but all of that is made much easier by government stepping in and doing nature repair markets properly. But we also need, in addition to government being present in all of those, community and organised community at every single step. Your voices are important. Your organisations are important. Some people here come from big corporates. Some people here come from philanthropic organisations. Some people here come from volunteer organisations or organisations that have some employees and a whole lot of volunteers that get down on the ground. All of you are the engine of this revolution that we need to be going through right now. And as we each play our part, not only will we see the change occurring, but we also will be able to hold on to those important elements of a sense of agency and a sense of hope. Because as desperate as things are, I refuse to believe that the fundamental ingenuity and grit of the human species won't get us through. But each revolution has required people to talk about things in a different way, to provide action that people can take, and to shift the economic levers in favour. And that's our task right now. And I may not be the Environment Minister anymore, but I'm still part of the team. Thank you.
Not the Environment Minister anymore, but still part of the team. Thank you so much, the Honourable Susan Close, for joining us at this breakfast this morning, and a very, very passionate speech indeed. As you might notice, the Pullman team are already serving breakfast, so please eat. We're running a little bit behind. So while you're eating, I'm just going to go through some of the housekeeping materials that I need to go through as part of this role. Firstly, a reminder that you can check out who's in the room by using the QR code on your table menus below the program. So this is a great networking event as well. So try and meet someone new or a few new people this morning. You can also see a very important QR code below today's menu, which you can use to make a donation to our host organisation. We just heard from Vibeke about the significant work being undertaken and the ambitious and exciting 2030 strategy at Bush Heritage. So please consider making a contribution to support this fantastic organisation. And now this is really, really important. We also have some great prizes on offer this morning, including a gift pack from Botanic Envy, a Genesque Pamper experience and a cabin gift voucher to go off-grid, and all guests have been automatically put into the draw. So, woohoo! So, and that will be drawn at 10 o'clock this morning, so don't leave before then, okay? All right, so enjoy your breakfast and we'll be back shortly. Thank you. Let's just jump straight into the big question of the morning then, because you've obviously got a hell of a lot of experience, all three of you. From your perspective and experience, how do you think we can best tackle the issues of climate change and biodiversity loss concurrently? We'll start with you, Melissa, if we can. I was expecting to be second. I'll mix it up. Keep you on your toes.
Keep you on my toes. No, I think that's it's the question, and I've thought about this a lot. But I think one of the things, in particularly the area that I work in, is looking at how to make policy about, the policy connections between biodiversity and sort of climate policies, and how they talk and walk to each other, and how they make them a bit more adaptable and sensitive. I think one of the other really important aspects is looking at how we, as a community, build community resilience, and how we communicate the ideas of biodiversity and connection to those sort of the big problems that we're facing. I think it's really, really important to acknowledge that, we are living, wherever we are in Australia, on someone's country. And it was country that wasn't ceded, and there's an amazing resource and heritage there, and just living culture. And I think that in terms of connecting climate and biodiversity, you've got that idea of connection that's implicit in the idea of country, but it's also just something that I work in a lot. How do you connect different communities to the idea of the twin faces, if you like? And how do you do it without invoking doom and gloom, and how do you deal with the fear? And one of the things I'm really interested in that context is how you deal with the idea of sitting with conflict and being able to create spaces for discomfort, to be able to allow conversations that are really difficult. How do you, in the Lake Eyre Basin, deal with the extraction of water for energy and the transition, as against the Arabana people having their springs being denuded and their cultural knowledge being compromised and threatened? How do you build those things together? So I think it's about connecting the two things together and making people understand that there are ways that you broker partnerships and policies and investments in ways that have tangible outcomes. But more than that, the psychological architecture of our society needs to change, create that connection so that we move forward together.
And we'll be hearing more about that as we continue discussing. What about you, Frances?
From the private sector side, there needs to be that business case demonstrated, and it is there. It just is how you communicate it to boards and executives. Going on from the policy area, it's going to be really important for governments to develop policies that incentivise businesses to protect nature and not to destroy it. So at the moment in Australia, it's actually cheaper and faster to destroy nature than to protect it. So there's no incentive there for businesses from a policy point of view to protect nature when it costs them more to do it. Through taxation, carrot and stick measures, fiscal policy is really important. So taxation is a really powerful lever that could be used as well. The finance sector and insurance companies have a big part to play in this from a market perspective. So the CEO of Allianz said that if business is usual with climate change happening, the insurance industry will be broke. As in the current modelling, insurance just won't work. So insurance companies have a big role to play in incentivising businesses to protect nature for resilient supply chains and sustainable operations. And then obviously with financing, banks obviously can play a role with green loans, blended finance, mezzanine debt, if you are sitting in certain industries or you're not doing certain things. So again, carrot and stick, not just stick. So you want to incentivise companies to do that. And then the other thing is just demonstrating as a sustainability professional to the board is that this de-risks your company. So in agriculture, our whole business is reliant on a stable ecosystem. We need healthy soils. We need access to fresh water. We need stable temperatures, consistent precipitation, because farmers are really struggling to predict what's going to happen on their land. And to maintain that asset when you don't have that consistency is really hard when it comes to financing and revenue projections and those sort of things. So for companies like Thomas Foods, supporting our producers to have resilient natural capital is benefits not only the producer, but benefits us as well.
Yep. And finally, Tiahni, what do you think needs to happen?
Slight shameless promotion for Bush Heritage's podcast, but we actually used our third season of Big Sky Country to talk about the link between climate change and biodiversity and how entwined they are. So that's just released within the last couple of months, and it's a great listen. There's actually, on the back of your little pamphlets, there's a little logo so that you don't forget. If you feel like having a listen to my voice, I'm sorry. And many other incredible people doing great work in this space. We travelled around to our reserves, chatted to scientists, policymakers, traditional custodians, other people in Bush Heritage doing great work, and talked about the link between biodiversity loss and climate change in relation to oceans, traditional knowledge, collaboration, and working across sectors, and a bunch of other great episodes. So there's a really great resource for us to use there that you can share around. I think climate action without biodiversity protection is incomplete, and biodiversity protection without climate action isn't sustainable. So we really need to change the way that we think about this. I think the three key levers, and I'll keep this one short, is centering Indigenous leadership and knowledges and making sure that we do that in the right way. Our custodians care for over 50% of Australian soil now through IPA protection, but we haven't given the right support or agency or the right rights to be able to prevent things like mining on these lands. So we need to really consider the way that we do partnerships and empower our First Nations communities to know what's happening on their country and be able to give them the agency to actually make decisions so that they can stand up against mining companies and look after their own country in the right way. The other point is about protecting and restoring ecosystems, so seagrass, mangroves, salt marshes, they all store up to 10 times more carbon than terrestrial landscapes, so there's a big lever there, and cross-sector partnerships, so us all working together, knowing that us coming together through government, NGOs and different collaborations and thinking differently about the way that we can work together is the right way to go.
All right, our next question is to Francis. There's more companies, and you did flag this a little bit in your last answer, as more companies start paying attention to protecting nature, what are some real chances to invest in nature-based solutions that actually benefit both business and the environment?
Yeah, I just following on from what I said before, it's building into a resilient supply chain and also operations. So what you need to do is a materiality assessment, and I would question any company that does a materiality assessment and nature doesn't come up as a material aspect, risk or opportunity area for that company. And then that identifies how much does your business rely on nature. And then you can put a value on that. Now, we can value that nature, we generally do, based when it's gone and there's a disaster. So, when there's, with bees and varroa and that pollination service goes, they've been able to value that. So that's the value of bees and insects with pollination. With soil health, with drought, when topsoil gets lost, we know the value of that. So that value, firstly, we need to build it into business balance sheets, because once you value it, you can actually measure it and then monitor it and put some KPIs around it. And then to de-risk it, then it supports the business when it goes through those times, particularly with agriculture. I can speak for agriculture like now. So we've got floods in the north and we've had drought in the south, and livestock prices are one of the highest on record. So companies like TFI are really being squeezed because of a climate change issue where there's hardly any stock in Australia. I don't know if anyone's noticed that lamb is ridiculously expensive because we cannot find lamb anywhere. And that is because of climate change. So if we can support our farmers to invest in their natural capital, with nature plus other climate levers, it builds their resilience. So when, not if, this situation comes around again with floods and drought, they have more resilience to get through this period. They don't have to ship water in, they don't have to destock as much, they can keep their breeding stock, the quality of the meat is maintained. So there's definitely that benefit there for an agriculture company. It also reduces the cost of logistics, having to transport livestock, so there's an animal welfare factor there as well, to not have to source livestock from far-reaching areas of Australia. Being such a large continent, livestock has already been transported quite far distances. So it
really
helps with that.
And also, when it comes to, you obviously know what should be done and could be done. What about the leaders? So let's talk about Tier 5, if you can provide that as an example. How can you help leaders see that sustainability is something that adds value rather than it just being a hassle or a disruption? Not saying that they do, but from a leadership perspective, is that the feeling that you get sometimes? You need to actually really push it across the line to say, this is valuable, this is what you need to do.
Yeah, you really have to know your audience when you communicate sustainability. So telling a board sometimes that this is just the right thing to do, but some just don't care. And I'm not saying specifically Tier 5, but I've presented to many boards as a consultant as well, where, some just say, well, climate change isn't real. So you have to know your audience and you have to know the concerns you're pitching to. So with companies, in the end, it comes down to productivity. How is this going to benefit productivity? And it does come down to, what does this company rely on with nature? And you go down to those elements and you show that value chain through there, and you can quantify it. And to be honest, we have to do that now with the new climate regulations. I'm going to have to do that, and this is the difficult thing. So my job for this reporting period will be quantifying all our carbon emissions. So Thomas Foods, and this is in the public domain, has 3 million tonnes per year. 97% is livestock, which is incredibly hard to abate, methane. But I have to forecast those emissions out to 2050, and putting in climate factors like, I think a drought's going to happen here and floods here and livestock prices are going to do here. And then I have to convert that to numbers where we have to show what that impact will have on the company, on the cash flow, the profit and loss and the balance sheet out to 2050.
Oh my goodness.
So we have to do that. Now, the nature reporting is coming in, and I say to the board, if you think this is complicated, you wait till the nature reporting comes in, where we have to quantify this and show how much we rely on nature, what's the risk and where are the opportunities. So it's just all negative. There are opportunities here for businesses with markets that can really help with demonstrating that business case.
Thank you very much for sharing that. That's great. Tiahni, yes, put your hands together. That was a great example, wasn't it? We talk about protecting the environment. The deep knowledge and connection First Nations people have with country should be front and centre. How do you think we can bring together traditional custodian knowledge and Western science in a way that really supports hands-on conservation, while also empowering communities to foster resilience and well-being in their culture?
Thank you. It's a great question, and it's one that's kind of relatively easy to answer, but there's some foundational scaffolding that needs to happen for us to do right way science, or the culmination of, there's so many different ways that we refer to it now, right way science, two-way science, traditional ecological knowledge mixed with conservation science, all of these different terms. We're going to go with right way science because that's what we refer to at Bush Heritage today. We have found through evidence-based, peer-reviewed studies that when we right way bring Indigenous knowledge and Western science together, we create solutions that are more resilient, smarter, and are deeply connected to place, that have better outcomes for everybody. And there's a few things that need to underpin this relationship, and that includes FPIC, so free, prior, informed consent, which under our rights as Indigenous people, under the United Nations, UNDRIP, we have a right to know when anything happens on our land that we're asked and that we're told about work that's happening on our country. So that underpins everything that needs to be done. We have that right. We need to be engaged with on any Aboriginal land, which actually happens to be all of Australia, no matter who the land title owner is technically. The other one is about ISIP, which is Indigenous Cultural Intellectual Property, and that's creating an agreement or an arrangement so that our communities know whose knowledge sits where, what knowledge is shared. So if you have a project that you're doing and you're bringing results together, is it something that's owned by the company or the community, or you both together, or is it something that stays within the agency of the community? And what information is being shared and what's not? So it's a legal agreement that protects our knowledge systems. This is really important because in the native food business in Australia, less than 5% of native food businesses, Indigenous food businesses, are owned by Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people. And of that 5%, less than 3% of that is owned by women. So it's really important to have these conversations about who owns knowledge and how it goes forward and how we're going to work together. Co-design and having yarns and cups of tea and building relationships and having good reciprocity where we meet in the middle, not having extractive relationships from one another, is really important, and being clear about how we're going to come together, you know, rather than coming to someone and knocking on their door and being like, hey, I've got this amazing project. I need to get it signed off in a week's time. Can you just sign here and say that you've had a look at it? Having engagement from the start, making sure that we do things the right way, having the time and understanding that through our Indigenous governance systems, things are slow, not because we're slack, but because we have to ask so many people for their permission or their ideas or their input before we can sign something off. That's why it takes so long. So if we have a community board meeting once a month and we get 200 applications coming in asking for our input, you can imagine the load that continues to build month after month, and that lack of capacity that we have, the lack of funding, the lack of time, the lack of people coming to meetings because we get asked to do a million things all the time. So it's good to have that understanding and to meet people where they're at. And just make sure that everything's built on trust and reciprocity and honesty with a good foundation of respect.
Well done, well done. Well done, yes. Melissa, you've done some great work on how Indigenous knowledge innovations can help shape science and policy. So what does that actually look like when it comes to turning those ideas into real action, especially when it comes to biodiversity and climate change?
Yeah, I've been pondering this question for many years now, and I've talked to a lot of people recently about that specific question. What does that actually look like? And I'll say it. I'll relay and share some of my insights about that. But I think I've come to the realisation that that's actually the wrong question, because it's really the idea of embedding Indigenous knowledge into policy, it seems to me, becomes a fundamental act of appropriation. Like, how can you do that without documenting it somehow and fertilising it into a policy? So this is where I sort of start to think about, well, really it's about how do you utilise that knowledge into practice where we're actually building solutions on the ground and doing some stuff like you're talking about. But if you are actually talking about, incorporating sort of knowledge into policy, I think a couple of things that have come to mind, which is, first of all, we need to truly accept in our hearts the idea of multiple knowledges. And sometimes they're contested, but they need to coexist, and you need to respect and accept that they are all different. And you can't necessarily squeeze them all in this idea of integration, because so much of our world is, the Western legal system. So the integration often ends up the squeezing in of one knowledge under another, and it's usually the Indigenous knowledge under the predominant scientific one. And so that, I don't think that works. So I think accepting multiple knowledges and the coexistence of those knowledges, and then working, as I said before, with the fluidity and the opportunity that conflict and the contested spaces offer. Because often, it says, like necessity is the mother of invention. Well, I think in this space, it's like the mother of invention, where you're working in that space of contestation and going, how we've got the common problem, how we're going to harness the strengths of both knowledges and then work into that policy space. And I think the other thing is about communication. People have got to understand they actually need the policy and build in voices rather than knowledge. So you build in and work with Indigenous peoples and their diversity and their knowledges as part of the policy development process. So it becomes business as usual. And the Indigenous peoples have those voices in the policy frames as they're developed and then as they're implemented.
Can you provide an example of what you mean? Of what's happened in the past?
One example I can think of at the moment is over in New South Wales, for example. They have a thing called MEECP, which is the Marine Estate Expert Knowledge Panel. And what they're trying to do there is to say, okay, we have multiple government departments, we have multiple Indigenous groups in the marine and coastal estate. We have multiple agendas that we need to develop. And so instead of one government department going off and saying, I'm going to consult this Indigenous people and I'm going to go and develop this policy in the Department of Communities, and over here I'm going to go and develop the environmental policy over here. And what they do is they have a commitment that they all work together, and so that when one government department's talking about one policy, they'll communicate to all the other policies and all the other departments. And so there's a much more sort of speaking to lots of people and lots of knowledges as they're developing the policy and rolling it out. So that's one of the examples. But there's lots of examples in South Australia around, as we're speaking now, and I'm working quite a lot at the moment in the Lake Eyre Basin and also the Murray-Darling Basin, this commitment to incorporating different types of knowledges. And I might shout out not just Indigenous knowledges, but the knowledge, for example, of pastoralists who've been there for generations and claim rights to this knowledge and want to have it visible and seen and incorporated, that as the policies are rolling out, for example, right now in the Lake Eyre Basin, the commitment is to then going out and embedding a policy where you're going out speaking to different people before the policy is developed, not going out and say, have I got a good idea for you?
No, thank you. Francis, we've touched on agriculture, but we're going to go dig a little bit more deeper into this. Around 42% of the land is used for agriculture in South Australia, which is quite significant. But the exciting part is that farming actually has the potential to help fix up to 72% of the biodiversity loss we've identified. What kind of opportunities do you see for ag companies and landowners if they continue to value biodiversity and build resilience when they manage their land?
I think it really comes down to scale. So when you're dealing with an industry that has impact at so much scale, then yes, the risks are high, and we're seeing the impact of 200 years of some practices, as Susan said, but there's opportunity there. There's real opportunity there. Also, what is being proposed with regenerative agriculture, investing in biodiversity, or climate smart agriculture, whatever terminology you want to use, it actually benefits the agriculture sector. There's not really any case where if regenerative agriculture has been done well, has decreased the profitability and productivity of a farm. So it's about creating those linkages in the value chain from finance and insurance through to the processors like us, to the retailers like Woolies, and bringing the producers along on that journey, instead of like what you were saying with Indigenous people, also just don't telling producers what to do. They're getting a bit sick of it. They're being told what to do, and all different things from banks, from the government, from the EU, from us. And to be honest, the engagement with producers is really decreasing. So it's demonstrating the opportunities to them where it's like if you have a factory, if you don't invest in that factory and you just flog it and flog it and flog it, it's just going to be less productive and you're going to have more costs to restore it. So it's same with land and hydro systems and pollination services. If you do not restore them and maintain them, it's going to be less productive and you're going to have less resilience when things go wrong, which they will with climate change.
I'm going to say 2 words to you: carbon farming. Is that the way of the future?
Well, it is part of it. I think one of the challenges Australia has at the moment is because we're a bit later to the game, and I do come from an international space. I worked overseas for a long time and then came back to Australia and observed what was happening, is that we do have this carbon tunnel vision that we do. It's like everything's carbon, 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 and we can go from the frying pan into the fire with carbon solutions that destroy nature. Clearance of land for solar panels is a key example of that. Hydropower, probably one of the most destructive forms of energy for nature, and is questionable about, yes, the downstream has 0 emissions, but the build-up of sediment behind the dam wall creates a huge amount of methane, which they don't measure in their calculations. So having that full life cycle assessment that doesn't just include carbon, but includes social factors like Indigenous communities, women, nature, disposal with chemical pollution, like with batteries, all that sort of thing needs to be taken into LCAs, which I think the universities can have a real role in. But if we're just focusing on carbon farming, you miss the real opportunities around nature. And I think this comes back to policy. We have a federal minister, that's the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, not climate change and environment. And when you talk to him, he goes, environment's not my role, that's the role of the Minister for Environment. And it's like, so the federal government has separated the two. So therefore funding is different, policies are different, and there's a fragmentation there when it comes to actually implementation on the ground. So it's really important. And when people approach Thomas Foods to do carbon projects, I just say, I would like to know what the co-benefits here are. What is attached to this carbon project that adds value other than just carbon? Because in the international carbon space, you could not sell a carbon credit if it's just carbon. It has to have something else attached to it, like Indigenous communities, employment, green energy, gender, a lot around women, biodiversity, water, whatever it is. You have to have an ecosystem around that carbon asset. So what I'm talking about is a system approach. As I said, whatever word you want to use, like with agriculture, regenerative agriculture, carbon is part of that, and it will come with it if you do the steps correctly already. You'll already get that.
And is that messaging being articulated?
It is happening. Like there are
Okay.
definitely organisations and people out there that are articulating that. But I think the federal government and state government really need to get on board with that, with how those portfolios are managed and how funding trickles down to producers on the ground and NGOs and communities.
Okay, watch this space, as they say. It's usually a slow one, isn't it? Tiahni, we hear a lot about collaboration with traditional custodians, but power sharing is another level. How do you think organisations can move from symbolic inclusion to real shared leadership in addressing huge environmental challenges?
I guess changing from short-term wins and tick boxing to long-term thinking, which is the way that us mob think. We think about all of our plans at least 7 generations ahead. So when we're talking about what we're planning for, it's not just in election cycles of 4 years. We're thinking about 100 to 500 year plans about a world and an environment that we can't even envision right now, that we have no idea what it looks like. So it's a very different way of relating and a very different way of making relationships. We say in the space of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander partnerships, or being someone that works in the space that brings it together, it takes a really long time to build a good reputation and like 5 minutes to lose it, because we're thinking about the ways that we relate and the connections that we have and how that will impact for a really long time. So we need to look at things in a long-term way, and I think we have big yarns about 30 by 30. We need to make the commitments that we have to communities and to country and to nature intergenerational. And an example of that is the CUNMEG Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework that ensures that Indigenous governance and participation are explicit in delivery, and it tracks the benefits to both youth and elders over time, over a long period of time, which is something that is already existing, that's working well, that we can kind of piggyback on and use that sort of model and do great things here in Australia. We need to make sure that for this to happen right way, that we legislate FPIC properly and actually utilise that free, prior and informed consent, and that we also rely on youth voice of our young people coming up. Culturally, we rely on the knowledge of our elders, and we hear that our, older people, more mature people, dinosaurs. I didn't say that, that was you. Are experiencing a lot of burnout, and we're having a lot of change in the way that we do our community dynamics now by giving youth voice and agency. So Katrina sharing the story of her 15-year-old granddaughter is about bringing in that youth voice and bringing in youth empowerment. We know that our youth experience the world very differently to the way that we all grew up. I'm 30, and the difference between the way that my niece is growing up or my younger siblings to how I grew up is like a different world. So there's a lot of knowledge and a lot of understanding and a lot of support that needs to be given for young people to know that their voice is important to be able to carry this legacy of doing things the right way, especially when we talk about doing things from a symbolic or tick boxing to actually making a real commitment. We have to bring our young people on board so that they're a part of change making and that they feel like they have agency in this space. We need to invest in people, not just places. A really massive thing in the conservation sector is that we put a lot of time and funding into short-term projects for low-level careers. So it might be a Cert 3 in conservation that gets someone a foot in the door, and then they sit on a low wage and have nowhere to move, and they're basically waiting for someone in a senior position to quit or pass away for them to be able to accelerate their career. And then a great opportunity comes up in a different sector, generally mining, that offers training, development, leadership skills, support, cultural safety, and we actively take people out of caring for country to destruction of country because they have the scaffolding and the ability to train and support people. And we're human-centric, despite the fact that we know that we're different, that we're separate. We're not separate from nature, sorry. At the end of the day, if you're living or coming from an impoverished community where you haven't had access to education and food and resources like everybody else, and you're not given the support in conservation to heal country right way and become a leader in this space, no matter how much we invest in the place, if we don't invest in the people, we will never have long-term governance. We'll never care for country properly, and we'll just have a really high turnover rate of traineeships and Cert 3 people coming past, getting some education until they can find something better, which generally ends up being for big companies that will support them and destroy exactly what they want to protect in their life. So we've got to change that. It's a really disgusting part of what's happening in career development at the moment, and we feel like we don't have a choice when we're living in remote communities and we don't get the opportunity to nurture our families properly, and these other opportunities come up. People feel like they're tired. They know that they want to stay in the conservation space, but they're not given the support to become leaders and to have that development and to have the opportunities as other people do in the cities.
Well done. Thank you. I have a blue sky question to end on, and this one, I will start with you. If I gave each of you $500 million to spend on biodiversity protection and climate change action, where would you direct those funds and why? Melissa? 500 million. It's not enough. No, it's not enough. I thought of a few different answers to this question. It's like, that game that you play if you won the lottery, what would you spend it on? And so I guess for me, I came back down to the idea of community and investing it in the community. And it's really interesting that Tiahni just said what she said, because that was kind of the theme that I was going with, was that, back in the day, I was president of the Cairns Environment Centre. I was, a greenie working for TWIS, campaigning for the Cape York. I was a director on the Australian Conservation Foundation for 8 years, and then I became an academic. And one of the reasons why I became an academic is because all of those jobs were really, really badly paid, and I got pregnant. And so along with that, I just feel like I've seen Indigenous ranges. There are now
191 or something ranger groups, Indigenous ranger groups across Australia. They are looking out for our country and protecting our environment and our bush, and they are also pretty badly paid, you know. And then I'm thinking about the greenie groups that I worked with and the idea of trying to get them, and including groups, conservation groups like Bush Heritage. How do we find that voice? What's happened in the last 20 years is that people, through being slapped with lawsuits and all these other things that have happened, the conservation voice is being crushed in many ways, and we need to find money to invest in resourcing the people that are living out on the remote areas, managing our biodiversity, not just for them and for their country, but for all of Australia. We need to resource and keep safe the people that are working for the conservation NGO groups that go out there and expose themselves on behalf of everybody to say the hard things and say in the face of voting and all the rest of it that this is what we do. And I think that's what needs to happen, because the connection to the environment is, we 90% of us in Australia live within 20 kilometres of the coast. We are disconnected as a society from the environment. And I think it'd be really good if we Wilta Yala gave me what they called a sound bath yesterday. I had a meditation with lots of sound and it was fantastic. And I was thinking last night, we need to give society nature baths. We need to basically take the kids out and experience country, like I did when I was 7 and I cried when I left. You need to invest lots of money into those sorts of things. Planting trees is good, all that other thing, but I think bringing that connection back is really important. And I just want to end with this one thing. When I was working for Hopevale Aboriginal Council years ago, one of my friends there, he said, the thing you don't understand about Hopevale, Melissa, is you can take the boy out of Hopevale, but you can't take Hopevale out of the boy. Doesn't matter where he is. And to me, it would be really good if we as a society could think, you can take the people out of the bush and live in the city, but the bush never leaves the heart of our people.
Very true. Very true. Tiahni, what would you spend $500 million on?
A holiday.
I forgot that one.
She just got that back from there.
Oh my God, no, the world's on fire. We don't have time to rest. No, that's a very toxic thought process. Don't do that. Rest, please. Enjoy your life. No. There's a few things. I think there's the obvious one of purchasing land, partnering, putting money into partnerships to protect more of Australia. At Bush Heritage, we currently protect over 20 million hectares with our partners and agricultural partners. So there's that very easy thought process of let's look after more land and protect it from being destructed forever. Then there's also the thought process I go down of First Nations-led sea and land and sea management. Why do all the words we say, why are they all so long in this sector? It's so annoying. Give me a microphone and I'm all tongue-tied, I'm sorry. To fund the expansions. Fund the expansions of our Indigenous ranger programs and our IPAs. Like I said before, 50% of our land mass is cared for by mob, but our rangers receive less than 2% of environmental funding, which doesn't equate well at all. We need to resource our mob to have healthier country and thriving biodiversity, and also stronger cultural futures, and bringing in that intergenerational knowledge like I was talking about before. Restoring high impact ecosystems. I think the blue carbon space of mangroves, seagrass restoration and salt marshes is really, really important, but stopping the destruction in the first place is the major lever that we need to do, right? We can do restoration until the cows come home, or it sounds like they're not coming home anymore, but we need to protect what's here already. We have these amazing places of biodiversity that are still at risk of being destroyed. So that's the first one to look after. And then restore, regenerate, and act quickly like our lives depend on it, because they do, to all of the places that have the ability to be restored at max scale. I think I've run out of money, but then I would do a community-led climate adaptation and knowledge exchange. So I was just in Timor when we were doing localised permaculture farming. The Timorese have amazing local farming systems on their own land and do a really wonderful job of making sustainable food systems at their own places. And we do amazing large-scale ecosystem restoration and caring for country, and there's a gap of what we both focus on. So bringing those knowledges together in the right way is something that I'd really like to put some money for. And then let's all go on a holiday together. Yeah.
Frances, what about you?
I'll probably run out of money too, but yeah, just a couple of things. I think invasive species eradication, it's apart from land clearing is the biggest cause of extinction and endangered species in Australia, also is having a heavy impact on our producers and on our food security. So food security is going to be such an important thing. The world's population is increasing. I don't know where it's at now, 7-8 billion. It's only going to increase. The issue is not that number. The issue is you have an increasing middle class in there that have more money and want access to safe, affordable protein. So we need to provide protein solutions more efficiently and manage our natural capital more effectively and responsibly while feeding those people. Otherwise, they will find it somewhere else where you have public health issues. So, destroying rainforests to get access to bushmeat, huge issue in Africa. So feeding the world is so important with safe, affordable protein, and investing in systems, whether it's technology, to help with that is going to be really important. The other area I'm very concerned about is plastics, is that there is, particularly with medical plastics and food plastics, there is no alternative at the moment with food safety regulations and how long food has to be on the shelf. So we need to find a solution to replace plastics that fit the expectations of everyone in the room, where you want safe food and it lasts quite a long time on the shelf.
Definitely. 500 million, I think you might have overspent on that one. But I think Tiahni, Frances and Melissa have given us plenty of food for thought, and I think I'd be in pretty safe hands if these three were running the country too. So put your hands together for these three ladies. Well done. I'd now like to give you all the opportunity to continue the discussion amongst yourselves during this next break, because we're going to have a Q&A after this. And if you have any questions for our panellists, we have yet another QR code for you on the screen now, which we don't, but it will come up on the screen. Yes, there it is. Please use this to pop your question into our Slido app. Again, please feel free to move around, meet someone new, maybe ask them the $500 million question, and we'll see you very soon.
Thank you very much. I have a question, first off, to kick things off. So some organisations hold back from talking about their sustainability work, either because they're worried about being called out for greenwashing, or they're playing it safe with a bit of green hushing. So what advice would you give to businesses that are actually doing the work and want to bring nature and climate into their strategy without fear of getting it wrong? This is a question for you, Frances. Yep.
Yeah, both of them are big issues. The big thing is to get your data in place and get the facts in order. So it's really important for companies to defend themselves when they are faced with certain accusations, that they have the empirical evidence behind it to support their assertions. I think it's also important to, it's really weird that the sustainability function gets no grace as opposed to other functions. So people say to me, oh yeah, sustainable, blah, blah, it's good if it's done well. And I'm like, yeah, same with finance. And marketing and sales. If they're done badly, they're bad. It's like, or the CEO. So it's not the function, it's the people behind it and whether they're doing a good job and whether they're using facts. And it's really important for sustainability to use facts and not ideology. You have to go centre. As soon as you see facts that go against your belief, you have to have the ability to change your mind. Otherwise, you lose integrity. So the reason I say that is we need to give companies grace when they're legitimately putting targets forward and they may not meet it. It is really hard. Net zero is very hard. Like, a lot of companies have put through net zero, like I'm saying in the last 10 years, net zero disclosures, not understanding what net zero means, meaning it's also scope 3, and they just do an asterisk scope 1 and 2, and it's like, that's not net zero. There's no such thing as net zero asterisk. So it's either net zero or it's not net zero. And it's okay not to be net zero, because some industries, particularly us, we're going to struggle to be net zero because there's no technology available at the moment to decarbonise red meat to the level of production that we have for how much meat is eaten around the world. But we should decarbonise as much as we can, and offsets have a really important part to play in that, and high integrity nature-based offsets have a really important part to play in that. So if companies put forward a legitimate target and they try and meet it and they don't meet it, please don't slam them. Just find out what went wrong, what did they try and do, how did they... Maybe they've got to 80% of it. Great. That's awesome. That's better than nothing. So companies will start doing nothing, or not doing nothing, announcing nothing, and then they'll get criticised for not doing anything, and then they'll get criticised for doing something but not enough. So you need to have a bit more of a balanced, nuanced view on this, where, you know, technology's involved, human resources are involved, a lot of money is involved.
We've got a couple of questions on Slido. Have we passed a climate tipping point? If we have, what is our highest conservation priority? Who wants to take that one? Oh, hang on.
Well, I'll just say, technically the carbon budget for the climate is up 2030. We've reached that number. So we haven't reached the tipping point yet, but after 2030, on the trajectory we're on, yes, there's runaway train. That's very hard to get back. So from a science point of view, but I think...
Yeah, the graphs of warming show that we have and are continuing to reach our climate tipping point. That doesn't mean that there's not work that we can do. The rate that we're heating is wild, like we're getting towards 2.5, and the data shows that even if we stop all of the damaging things that we're doing as human beings right now, that the delayed effects of the damage that we will have done will continue to warm us over 2.5. So that's a very sobering thought that I'm sure a lot of us have in the back of our minds, or maybe pop up at 3 o'clock in the morning. But it's not to take away from the fact that there is so much that we can still do. We will live undeniably in an extremely different climate than the one that we're in right now. And the thing that I always think about is our low-lying island nations. My ancestral homelands on my father's side are a metre above sea level. Places that are already extremely hot. A couple of weeks ago, we had World Habitat Day, and I met one of the first Australian climate refugees from Tuvalu who has relocated here to Adelaide. The Australian government have started giving out packages for people to come and relocate because of climate and global warming. So yes, tipping point, I think we're there, we're entering it, but we need to wrap one another around with the support and the knowledge that despite the world being so different and all the loss that we will experience because of the damage that we've done, that this is our biggest opportunity for change, to be able to reimagine the way that we build cities, that we do urban greening, the way that we travel, the way that we use fuel, the way that we recycle, the way that we use virgin minerals, the way that we communicate and collaborate, and that there is no time more dire than now to think really big and really differently to make a big impact.
Well done, Tiahni. Thank you. Another question here on Slido. SA has a history of progressive leadership on key issues. Do you believe SA shows leadership on nature and biodiversity?
I think they're trying. And I think, like what you said about the businesses, that's better than not trying. So we do have a very recently released Biodiversity Act at the state level. I don't think it's perfect, but it's there, and that's something. But I think that leadership is is too often vested in government, or the feeling that it should be in government. And I think in South Australia, one of the fantastic things about South Australia, it has been progressive. It's, got all these firsts in terms of recognition of women. But if you look across the state, there are so many organisations doing amazing conservation work, from Aboriginal rangers to partnerships with groups like Bush Heritage, the Nature Conservancy, the NRM landscape boards are doing absolutely astonishing work. And I think if you reconfigure your idea of leadership, you can see that South Australia is really setting some benchmarks. And, it does tout itself a lot, South Australia, about being a leader in the energy space, and this is correct. 10 or 15 years, when I first arrived back in Adelaide, South Australia was winning national awards for its climate adaptation framework and, its climate change sort of, initiatives. But I think, you shouldn't underrate or underestimate the leadership and power of the people in the community groups, in the Indigenous communities out there trying to protect biodiversity.
What difference will it make if South Australia secured COP31 next year?
I'm not the right person to talk about that because I feel bringing in 35,000 people to have a meeting where 35,000 people pretend they're going to influence a process when it takes so much carbon to get to Adelaide to attend that meeting, so I'm not the right person to talk about it. I think COP is really important. Do I think thousands of people need to descend on a city anywhere that COP is held, and all the carbon that's used in proportion to the influential outcome on climate change that will happen as a result? No, I don't. So I'm sorry if that's rude, but that's how I feel.
Maybe COP31 on Teams.
I'll attend then.
The smallest icons for everyone's faces. I just wanted to bring in this, I guess, we always talk about standing on the shoulders of our wonderful ancestors, and also not so wonderful, for all of us, that there is a lineage of people behind us who have been doing great work, and we exist in this space with the progress that we've had because of incredible people who have forged the way. South Australia, Adelaide was the first place that women could vote, which is pretty cool. We also have our voice to Parliament, which is fantastic. In the space of climate and biodiversity, where other than Canberra, we're leading the way with renewable energy. We have our new Biodiversity Act, which was a huge undertaking by the state. We are named one of only 2 national park cities in the world, and that's thanks to Green Adelaide. Sharon, do you want to pop your little hand up? Was a huge part of that. There's a Green Adelaide team over there, and a huge plug to Green Adelaide, who are our local city landscape board. So yeah, they do incredible work. There's rewilding in the city, there's urban greening. We're having a massive look at the way that we do public transport and bringing nature. We have Nature Festival, which is a couple of weeks where we celebrate nature and mud and frogs and birds and all of the nerdy stuff that I personally love, and are making it cool and sexy for trendy alternative 20-year-olds to enjoy and think that they're cool too. So that's cool. We're making nature sexy. That's really important. We also have the Premier's Climate Change Council here in South Australia, where we have a group of members who give direct advice to the Minister about the way that climate impacts all of the sectors together. So I really do believe that we have an incredible lever in South Australia to positively affect climate, and that we are leading in the space, and we do get a lot of questions from other states and other regions about what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why we're doing it well. And all of you in this room are a part of the change, doing fantastic work on the ground or behind policy. So a massive round of applause to all of you for being here and doing that work yourselves. Thank you.
Well done. Well, I think we'll finish on that. I think that finishes quite strongly. I want to say a big thank you to Tiahni, Melissa and Francis for their insights this morning and their knowledge. We are going to have a short presentation from Christina Tonkin, who is ANZ's ANZ is our major sponsor, representing ANZ. And then after Christina's speech, we will be revealing the raffle winners. So stick around, please.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I definitely know I'm standing between you and the raffle and the rest of the day. But, you know, it's absolutely glorious to be here in Adelaide this morning. My name's Christina Tonkin. I'm the Managing Director of Corporate Finance at ANZ. I'm actually based in Sydney. I live in Longueville. It's Camaragal country. I'm delighted to be here on the unceded lands of the Gurana people this morning. And I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and to their emerging leaders, both here in Adelaide, but across our great country. And I indeed pay my respects to any Indigenous leaders in the room this morning. A couple of weeks ago in Sydney, I was at the Investor Group for Climate Change Conference. It was an important day. I was celebrating 20 years at ANZ, and it was actually Investor Group for Climate Change's 20-year celebration. We were obviously sponsoring that. Al Gore was the keynote speaker, and Minister Penny Sharp, who covers climate, energy, environment and water, spoke also very powerfully about that it's not climate action versus the environment, it's climate action versus the economy, it's climate action for the economy. And I think that's a very important message that I'm absolutely delighted to hear reinforced here in South Australia. You know, I think particularly the panel this morning, which has been fantastic, it's been incredibly powerful, I think, to hear the role that Indigenous communities and Indigenous knowledge plays in this crisis that we're leaning into today. At ANZ, we're very much aware of the linkages between First Nations, people, nature, and the transition of our economy to net zero emissions and indeed better protection for nature. And how we work with First Nations peoples in advance of these goals is most important. At present, we're actually doing some work in Western Australia in a project called Wheatbelt Connect with a couple of our hard-to-abate customers, although I like to call them ready-to-abate customers, being Qantas and Inapex. And this is in the Western Wheat Belt, and we're also working with Indigenous communities, including the Burmara Aboriginal Corporation over there. And that is in terms of large-scale restoration and a leasehold model working with agricultural entities around, indeed, carbon farming, but also native restoration and high-integrity offsets. As ANZ's Managing Director in Corporate Finance, I lead a global team that's responsible for the provision of lending solutions to our customer base with the efforts of driving capital into sustainable projects and solutions. I have a team of about 400 people operating in about 22 markets, and it's absolutely front and centre of everything that we're doing. Our sustainable finance team supports our customers across the nation and indeed globally with integrating nature-related targets into sustainability-linked loans, bonds and other financial instruments. These financial instruments do have the ability to drive investment through linking the cost of capital to the delivery of conservation, biodiversity and other nature outcomes. Looking beyond that sustainable finance perspective of the labelled, which is quite often focused at large entities, environmental markets do have a role to play in mobilising investment into place-based outcomes that may not be efficiently served by these kind of larger type programs. We have a dedicated environmental markets team that's supporting our customers with understanding the risks and opportunities related to the carbon markets, many of which trade carbon credits sourced from high integrity nature-based carbon removal projects. So for those that are interested, there's a team of ANZers over there, wave, led by Rachel. She'd be more than delighted to speak to you about that. It's definitely true that in this jurisdiction, actually executing nature-related transactions is reasonably new, but it's definitely a growing frontier within the Australian sustainable finance market. which is why we've been delighted to see recent guidance related to integrating nature into financial products from the International Capital Markets Association, which is the global association representing participants in the international debt capital markets, and the work that they've been doing with the Australian Land Conservation Alliance, ALCA, which I'm sure a number of you in this room are familiar. So specifically, the ICMA has released a Sustainable Bonds for Nature, a practitioner's guide back in June, and ALCA here in Australia has released their Conservation Finance Handbook back in February, which I think is driving important work in terms of how we can finance more ground-based solutions. ANZ is one of the founding members of the Australian Sustainable Finance Institute, alongside the other banks, non-banks, investors, and indeed insurers. Back in June, they have been doing the work with the Australian federal government on the taxonomy. The taxonomy was released back in June, and it's now in a pilot phase. Indeed, some of my team are in Canberra this week with Christy Graham, the CEO, and they have a number of meetings with ministers and indeed financial regulators on how we can kind of drive more debt capital into the space. It's very important to be able to do that and to have those frameworks to address these issues of greenwashing and its evil twin, green hushing. And so we can have a much more common platform and a system that is very tailored and suited to the Australian environment across, of course, all the different aspects of the community that requires decarbonisation and focus on nature. Prior, of course, to all of this guidance, ANZ has been incorporating nature-related targets into sustainability-linked financing. Back in 2022, an example of this is a sustainability-linked loan for North Queensland airports that actually did incorporate quite strong biodiversity targets. If anybody was here at the ALCA conference, which was held in Cairns this year, we had a presentation sort of coordinated by our Head of Environmental Markets with Lucy Friend from Queensland Airports and Uncle Brian Singleton from Mangrove Solutions, and they spoke quite at length about the biodiversity targets and the restoration associated with that project. We're not actually just supporting these on a one-off basis. We have, of course, a purpose at ANZ to shape a world where people and communities thrive. And the journey has been quite a long one. It's 20 years ago since ANZ signed the Equator Principles, which of course are the principles that govern social and responsible lending in the project finance market for standalone projects. A decade ago in 2015, we came out with our inaugural climate statement and our inaugural $10 billion target to work with our customers to finance particularly low carbon solutions. That grew from 10 to 25 to 50. We closed out that particular target. 2.5 years ago, we announced a $100 billion target by 2030. Our last reported date back in March, we reported just over 60 billion against that target. Indeed, I've just signed off this week on our forthcoming results, and I'm pleased to say that the team's been very busy over the last half, so we've absolutely substantially increased on the 60 billion. Of course, it's a target, it's not a credit card limit, so we're always very interested to be working with forward-looking companies on how we can drive better solutions as we move forward. So I'd also like to add my thanks to Bush Heritage, to Vibeke, and of course to Megan Pritchard for putting on this event this morning. It's fabulous to see 200 people in the room here. I'd like to thank Annabelle for being the MC, to Francis, Tiahni and Melissa for sharing their experiences. Of course, I know Katrina's gone, but that was a glorious welcome to country this morning. And of course, it was very inspirational to hear the Honourable Susan Close speak so passionately about the state of South Australia. And I would definitely encourage everyone in this room to continue these conversations locally about what we can do to drive better outcomes here in this great state. So I'm going to pass it back. We're going to do the prize giving, and I really do hope that everybody enjoys the rest of the day.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you very much to the ANZ for sponsoring this event this morning. Okay, the moment we've all been waiting for. Get my notes in order. Okay, prize one. Oh, hang on. Now, prize one. A Botanic Envy Discovery set featuring 7 signature collection fragrances. Thanks to Sharon from Botanic Envy for donating this prize. Table 12, are you listening? Diane Favier from Department of Environment and Water. Well done. Okay, prize 2 is a voucher for a Janesk Babchi and balancing experience with including facial and massage. Shout out to Kristen at Janesk for donating this great prize. And this prize goes to someone on table 2, Beck Charmer from Ernst & Young. Well, prize 3, a cabin gift voucher to go off-grid, step away from the noise and reconnect with nature. Sounds absolutely glorious. Thanks to ANZ for making this prize possible. And this prize goes to someone on table 18. Pip Robinson from Green Adelaide. Can we all come? Yeah. Finally, and it doesn't stop there, finally, each of our lovely native centrepieces are also prizes. If you have a coloured sticker on the back of your place card, then you have also won this beautiful native plant. So have a look. Excellent. Okay, well that pretty much... I'll just get your attention briefly because we're about to close the event. Absolutely. Yes, that draws this morning's formalities to an end, and we thank everyone for their attendance. A special thank you again to our panellists, Tiahni, Francis and Melissa. You were absolutely brilliant. To ANZ and Christina Tonkin for supporting this morning's gathering. Our special guest speaker, the Honourable Susan Close, and of course, thank you to Bush Heritage Australia for hosting this fantastic event, and to Megan Pritchard, who is the brains behind this morning's event, who's done all the hard work behind the scenes. And yes, she's done very well. And whilst the formalities have concluded, there is additional networking after this breakfast if you'd like to continue chatting. Thank you again for your attendance. My name's Annabelle Homer. Pleasure to be here, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day.